Let me ask you a question that might sting a little bit. Have you ever spent your hard-earned money on a bucket of the liveliest, most energetic minnows in the bait shop, only to watch them turn into stiff, lifeless pieces of meat the exact second they hit the water? You drop your line, you wait for that iconic thump on your rod, and absolutely nothing happens. You reel it in 10 minutes later, and your minnow looks like it has been dead for a week. What if I told you that you are accidentally killing your own bait, and the fish are completely ignoring your hook because of it? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are talking about the ultimate early spring fishing mistake. We are diving into why your minnows are dying of temperature shock the second they hit that 40-degree March water. I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to realize that everything you thought you knew about keeping bait alive in the spring is probably wrong. I am going to show you a simple tweak that will keep your bait kicking like crazy and trigger strikes from fish that usually ignore you. So, let me know in the comments right now. Do you just toss your minnows straight into the lake, or do you actually take the time to prepare them? Be honest. Let us get into it. Early spring is a strange time for fishermen. We have been sitting inside all winter, staring at our tackle boxes, just waiting for the ice to melt. When March finally rolls around, the fever hits. We rush to the local bait shop, load up our gear, and head straight for the water. But here is the problem. While the air temperature might feel nice and warm, like 50 or 60 degrees in the afternoon sun, the water is still brutally cold. We are talking about 40-degree water that will freeze you to the bone. For generations, fishermen have just assumed that a minnow is a minnow. The old grandfather logic says that fish live in cold water, so bait fish should be fine in cold water too. You buy them, you hook them, you throw them out there, and you hope for the best. People have been doing this exact same routine for decades, never stopping to wonder why they have to constantly change out their dead bait every 15 minutes. We blame the bait shop. We say they sold us a bad batch. We blame the oxygen in our bucket. But we rarely look at the massive invisible wall of temperature we are forcing these tiny fish to crash into. It is a cycle of frustration that costs you money, and more importantly, costs you fish. Picture this scenario for a second, because I know you have lived it. It is a crisp March morning. You wake up early, grab your gear, and head to the local bait shop. The bell on the door rings as you walk in. The shop is comfortably warm, probably sitting right around 68 degrees inside. You walk over to the bubbling concrete tanks and ask the owner for 24 of his absolute best, most lively minnows. He scoops them up with his net, and they are splashing everywhere. They look absolutely perfect. They are full of energy, darting around the net, completely ready to catch you that trophy walleye or a massive slab crappie. You hand over your cash, grab your plastic bait bucket, and head back out to your truck. You are feeling incredibly confident. You have the secret weapon now. Live energetic bait. But right here, in this very moment, the countdown to a ruined fishing trip has already started, and you do not even realize it yet. The water in that bait shop tank is a controlled, luxurious environment. Those little fish are living a stress-free life, and you are about to take them from a 5-star hotel straight into an icy nightmare without any warning. Now, let us talk about the truck ride to the lake. This is where the first major mistake happens, and it is something almost everyone does without thinking. You get into your truck, and because it is a chilly spring morning, you crank the heater up. The cabin gets nice and toasty. Your bait bucket is sitting on the floorboard or on the passenger seat, soaking up all that ambient heat. The water inside your bucket, which was already around 60 degrees from the bait shop, might actually warm up a few more degrees during the drive. You are feeling great, sipping your hot coffee, listening to the radio, totally focused on where you are going to cast your first line. But inside that bucket, your minnows are adjusting to a tropical vacation. Their metabolisms are speeding up because of the warmth. They are breathing normally, swimming comfortably, and totally unprepared for the harsh reality that is waiting for them at the boat ramp. You are literally softening them up. You are making them weak to the cold by keeping them too comfortable. Every single minute that heater blows warm air onto your bait bucket, you are widening the temperature gap between the water your minnows are swimming in and the water you are about to throw them into. You finally arrive at the lake. You step out of the truck, and immediately a cold spring wind hits you right in the face. You grab your rods, your tackle bag, and your bucket of perfectly happy warm minnows. You walk down to the bank or step onto your boat. The lake looks beautiful, but it is deceiving. Beneath that glittering surface, the water temperature is sitting right around 40 degrees. It is barely above freezing. But you are in a rush. The fishing fever has completely taken over your brain. You want a line in the water right this second. You do not check the water temperature. You do not think about the transition. You set your bucket down, pop open the lid, and reach your warm hand inside. You grab a frantic, kicking minnow. It is slippery, full of life, fighting you the whole time you try to hook it through the lips or behind the dorsal fin. This little guy is ready to swim. He is energetic. You think to yourself, oh yeah, the crappie are going to absolutely destroy this bait. You open your bail, pull your rod back, and make a beautiful long cast right next to a submerged laydown. The bobber hits the water, settles perfectly, and you wait. But disaster has already struck. Let us break down exactly what happens the millisecond your bait hits that cold lake water. Imagine stepping out of a hot sauna directly into a frozen snowbank completely naked. That violent, breath-stealing shock that hits your chest is exactly what your minnow experiences. The water in your bucket was 60 degrees. The water in the lake is 40 degrees. That is a 20-degree drop in less than 1 second. The minnow does not gently swim down to your desired depth. It hits that freezing wall of water, and its entire biological system goes into immediate overdrive, followed by a total shutdown. The minnow goes into severe temperature shock. Its tiny muscles instantly cramp and lock up. Its gills flare out as it struggles to process oxygen in the radically different water density. The energetic kicking that you felt in your hand just seconds ago stops completely. The minnow becomes rigid, paralyzed by the extreme cold. It is not dead yet, but it is entirely useless to you as live bait. It cannot swim, it cannot struggle, and it cannot flash its silver sides to attract a predator. It just hangs there, suspended under your bobber, or dragging lifelessly behind your jig, entirely shocked into submission. Why does this matter so much? Because predatory fish like walleye, crappie, and bass are visual hunters that respond to movement and vibration. In 40-degree water, the predators themselves are sluggish. Their metabolism is slow. They are not going to chase down a fast-moving lure, which is exactly why you brought live bait in the first place. You need the bait to do the work for you. You need the minnow to struggle, to dart around, and to send out distress vibrations through the lateral lines of the game fish. A struggling minnow triggers a predatory instinct. It looks like an easy meal. But a shocked, stiff minnow hanging perfectly still on a hook does not look like food. It looks like a piece of debris. It looks entirely unnatural. A big, smart crappie will swim right up to your rigidly shocked minnow, stare at it for 5 seconds, and slowly swim away. They know the difference between a natural, cold-blooded bait fish that is surviving in the environment and a paralyzed piece of meat that fell from the sky. If your minnow is not kicking, you are dramatically reducing your chances of getting a bite. You might as well be fishing with a bare piece of plastic. This brings us to the grandfather myth that has ruined so many early spring fishing trips. The old advice usually goes something like this. Ah, do not worry about the cold. A minnow is a tough little fish. Just throw them in, the cold water will wake them up. This is incredibly bad advice, and it completely ignores basic biology. Yes, minnows are tough. Yes, they can naturally survive in freezing water under the ice all winter long. But the key word there is naturally. In the wild, as winter approaches, the water temperature drops over the course of weeks and months. The minnow's biological systems slowly acclimate to the cold. Their blood chemistry changes. They adapt to the freezing temperatures gradually. They do not experience a 20-degree drop in a fraction of a second. Throwing a warm water minnow into freezing water does not wake them up. It shuts them down. It is a biological trauma. When you blindly trust the old way of doing things, you are guaranteeing that you will burn through your bait supply twice as fast, constantly pulling up dead stiff minnows and wondering why the bite is so incredibly tough today. Another massive factor people ignore is the difference in water density. Cold water is physically denser than warm water. When you take a minnow out of thin, warm water and plunge it into thick, freezing water, it struggles to maintain its buoyancy and balance. Have you ever reeled in your bait to check it, and noticed the minnow is spinning in circles or floating upside down, barely twitching? That is not just a tired minnow. That is a minnow whose swim bladder has been completely thrown out of whack by the sudden temperature and density change. It is experiencing a total loss of equilibrium. When a predatory fish sees a bait spinning unnaturally like a helicopter blade, it does not strike. It gets spooked. Unnatural presentation is the number one reason fishermen get skunked in the early spring. You think you are doing everything right because you bought the expensive bait and found the right brush pile. But because you ignored the temperature shock, your presentation is actively scaring the fish away from your hook. You are literally paying the bait shop to sabotage your own fishing spot. So, how do we fix this massive problem? The first and most important tool you need to buy this spring is not a new rod, and it is not a fancy new lure. It is a simple, cheap pool thermometer. You can buy them anywhere for a few bucks. Before you even think about putting a hook through a minnow, you need to know the numbers. You need to dip that thermometer into the lake and get a true reading of the surface water temperature. Then, you need to put that thermometer into your bait bucket. You will be absolutely shocked the first time you see the difference. You might see 58 degrees in the bucket and 41 degrees in the lake. Once you see that 17-degree gap with your own eyes, you will immediately understand why your bait has been dying. You cannot fix a problem if you cannot measure it. A thermometer takes all the guesswork out of the equation. It forces you to slow down and treat your bait with the care it actually requires. It is the single cheapest piece of gear that will instantly increase your catch rate in cold water conditions. The actual process of saving your minnows starts before you even reach the lake. It starts right there in the cabin of your truck. When you buy bait in March or April, you have to resist the urge to keep your truck cabin like a sauna. Turn the heater down. Roll the windows down a little bit. Keep the bait bucket in the bed of the truck or in the coldest part of the vehicle, away from the floor vents. You want to start the cooling process as soon as you leave the bait shop parking lot. Every degree you can safely drop the bucket temperature during your 20 or 30-minute drive is one less degree you have to worry about at the water. It is about gradual transition. If you can get that bucket water to slowly drop from 60 degrees down to 50 degrees during the commute, you have already won half the battle. You are letting the minnows slowly adjust to the reality of the cold, rather than letting them stay perfectly comfortable. Think of it as putting a jacket on them before shoving them out the door into the snow. It takes absolutely zero extra effort, just a little bit of mindful planning. Once you arrive at the fishing spot, this is where patience separates the great fishermen from the guys who go home empty-handed. Do not immediately bait your hook. I know it is hard. I know you want to start casting. But you need to dedicate the first 10 to 15 minutes of your trip to the acclimation process. Take your bait bucket down to the water's edge. Scoop out about 25% of the warm water from your bucket and dump it on the ground. Now, take your bucket and slowly scoop up some of that freezing cold lake water to replace it. What you are doing here is mixing the environments. You are gently bringing the temperature of the bucket down, while also introducing the minnows to the specific pH and water chemistry of the lake. Let the bucket sit there for 5 minutes while you tie your rigs, organize your tackle, or drink your coffee. Just let them adjust. You will see the minnows swimming around, getting used to the chill. They will not go into shock because the change is happening gradually, not instantly. After about 5 minutes, you are going to repeat the exact same process. Pour out another quarter of the water from the bucket and slowly replace it with more cold lake water. You are continually narrowing the temperature gap. If you have your thermometer, you can literally watch the numbers align. You are aiming to get the bucket water within about 5 degrees of the lake water. It usually takes 3 to 4 cycles of exchanging the water to get the temperature matched perfectly. During this time, keep an eye on your minnows. You will notice that they do not look paralyzed. They might slow down slightly because cold water naturally lowers their heart rate, but they will still be swimming upright, maintaining their balance, and looking very much alive. This process takes 15 minutes max. In the grand scheme of a 4-hour fishing trip, 15 minutes is absolutely nothing. But those 15 minutes will completely transform how your bait performs on the hook for the rest of the entire day. Let us talk about the gear you are using to hold your bait, because it plays a huge role in temperature management. A lot of guys use those cheap, thin, yellow or white plastic buckets. Those things are basically solar ovens or ice boxes, depending on the weather outside. They offer zero insulation. If you want to take your early spring fishing seriously, you need an insulated bait bucket. A bucket with a foam liner helps maintain a stable temperature environment. When you properly acclimate your water at the bank, an insulated bucket will hold that cold temperature even if the afternoon sun comes out and warms up the air. Without insulation, the sun beating down on a thin plastic bucket will rapidly heat the water back up, undoing all your hard work. You will end up shocking your minnows again later in the day without even realizing it. An insulated bucket creates a buffer against the outside elements. It gives you total control over the water temperature, ensuring that the last minnow you hook at the end of the day is just as lively as the very first one. Another massive mistake fishermen make in the cold is assuming that an aerator solves every single problem. You will see guys with 2 heavy-duty bubblers running in a small bucket, thinking that maximum oxygen equals maximum survival. While oxygen is absolutely critical, it does not prevent temperature shock. In fact, pumping warm air from a sunny spring afternoon through a bubbler into your bucket can accidentally warm the water up faster. Aeration is necessary, but it is not a magic shield against cold water paralysis. You have to balance oxygen with temperature control. In 40-degree water, minnows actually require slightly less oxygen than they do in 80-degree summer water, because cold water holds dissolved oxygen much better. So, keep your aerator running, but do not rely on it to save your bait from a 20-degree temperature drop. The bubbler keeps them breathing, but the temperature mixing process is what keeps their muscles from locking up. You have to manage both systems at the same time to have truly perfect live bait. There is also a physical element to hooking the bait that nobody talks about. When you reach into the bucket to grab a properly acclimated cold minnow, your hands are 98 degrees. If you squeeze that tiny fish too tightly, or hold it in your warm palm for too long while you fumble with your hook, you are transferring a massive amount of heat directly into its body. You can actually cause localized temperature shock just from the heat of your own hands. You need to handle cold water bait as quickly and gently as possible. Wet your hands in the cold lake water before you reach into the bucket. This cools your skin down and removes dry spots that can peel the protective slime coat off the minnow. Pin the minnow lightly, slip the hook under the dorsal fin or through the lips quickly, and get it into the water. The less time that cold adjusted minnow spends in your hot hands, the better it is going to perform when it gets down into the strike zone. Now, let us think about the vertical drop. When you are fishing in early spring, especially for walleye or crappie, you are often dropping your bait into deeper water where the fish are holding close to structure. The surface water might be 40 degrees, but as your bait sinks 10, 15, or 20 feet down, it is going to hit thermoclines. The water down deep might be even colder, closer to 38 degrees. If your minnow was already struggling and shocked from hitting the surface, the journey down to the bottom is going to finish the job completely. It will be completely dead by the time it reaches the fish. But if you took the time to properly acclimate your bait in the bucket, it will have the biological strength to handle that slow descent through the water column. It will reach the bottom structure still kicking, still upright, and still fighting against the hook. That struggle down in the dark water is exactly what pulls those big, lazy, cold water predators out of the brush piles to investigate your rig. Let me paint a picture of what a successful cold water live bait presentation actually looks like when you do it right. You cast your bobber out over a submerged stump. The properly acclimated minnow hits the 40-degree water and does not lock up. Instead, it feels the cold and instinctively tries to swim downwards, looking for cover. It pulls against the resistance of the bobber. From the surface, you can see your bobber twitching, dancing, and making tiny ripples. That is the visual proof that your bait is working for you. Down below, a sluggish crappie sees that panicked, struggling movement. It looks natural. It looks like a weak, vulnerable prey item that belongs in that environment. The crappie does not have to expend much energy to catch it, so it slowly inhales the minnow. Your bobber shoots under, you set the hook, and you are fighting a beautiful slab. All of that happened because your minnow had the energy to dance in freezing water. It is a chain reaction of success that starts entirely with water temperature management. If you are jigging instead of using a bobber, the rules apply just the same. A lot of anglers like to tip their jigs with a live minnow in the spring. When you hop that jig off the bottom, a shocked, dead minnow just flops around like a wet sock. It adds no independent action to the lure. but a lively acclimated minnow will try to right itself every single time the jig pauses. It will flare its tail and try to swim upright. That secondary action, the independent movement of the bait during the pause, is the deadliest trigger for early season walleye. They will follow the jig, watch it drop, and the exact second the live minnow kicks on its own, they strike. You cannot fake that natural quiver with artificial baits, and you certainly cannot get it from a minnow that died of cold shock 10 minutes ago. Managing your bait temperature is essentially unlocking the true potential of your live bait presentations. It takes your rig from being a piece of meat on a stick to a dynamic living trap. Think about the financial side of this mistake too. Live bait is not cheap anymore. A couple dozen premium minnows can cost a significant amount of money at a good bait shop. When you throw them straight into freezing water and they die, you are forced to reel in and put a fresh one on. You end up burning through your entire bucket in 2 hours because you are constantly trying to find a minnow that still has a little bit of life left in it. By taking 15 minutes to acclimate the bucket, one single minnow can last for 30 or 40 minutes on the hook, actively swimming the entire time. You will use half as much bait, save money, and spend significantly more time actually fishing instead of constantly rebaiting your hooks with frozen hands. It is an efficiency hack as much as it is a fish catching secret. The guys who complain about the bait shop selling them weak minnows are almost always the same guys who burn through 3 dozen minnows in a morning because they refuse to manage their water temperature. It is amazing how one invisible factor like water temperature can completely dictate the outcome of your day on the lake. You can have the perfect rod, the invisible fluorocarbon line, the exact right depth set on your slip bobber, and the absolute perfect location. But if the biological engine of your bait is shut down by cold water shock, all of that preparation is completely wasted. Fishing in March and April requires a shift in mindset. You cannot just act like it is a warm July morning. You have to respect the cold water, and you have to force your bait to respect the cold water before you put it on the hook. It is a game of details. The anglers who consistently pull limits of big fish out of freezing water are the ones who pay attention to the details that everyone else ignores. They are the ones standing on the bank, slowly mixing water into their bucket, watching the thermometer, while everyone else is casting dead bait to empty water. So the next time you get that early spring itch and you head to the bait shop, remember this exact conversation. Stop treating your minnows like invincible little machines. Treat them like the biological creatures they are. Buy the thermometer. Manage your truck heater. Take the 15 minutes at the ramp to mix the lake water into your bucket. Let them get cold gradually. I guarantee you the very first time you do this, and you pull up a minnow 20 minutes later that is still violently kicking on the hook, you will realize exactly what you have been missing all these years. You will suddenly become the guy on the bank who is pulling in fish after fish, while the guy next to you is scratching his head, wondering why the fish will not bite his perfectly good, freshly dead bait. It is a small adjustment, but it is the ultimate game changer for cold water spring fishing. To wrap this all up, the biggest secret to early spring fishing is not what you are throwing, but how you treat it before you throw it. The twist is that we have been accidentally killing our own bait for years, totally unaware of the violent shock we were putting them through. By simply slowing down, using a thermometer, and letting your minnows gradually acclimate to that brutal 40-degree water, you keep them energetic, natural, and incredibly tempting to cold water predators. It changes your entire approach from hoping for a bite to actively triggering strikes with lively presentation. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me today. If this video opened your eyes and helped you rethink your spring fishing strategy, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and join the community. I want to hear from you now. What is the craziest myth or old school trick you have ever heard about keeping bait alive? Drop it in the comments below and let us see who has heard the wildest story. Stay warm out there, respect the cold water, and I will see you on the next cast.